A very warm welcome to Art Gallery Explorer, art lovers, with me, George Dopamine. This is the vlog which explores and celebrates the London art scene. And today I'm in leafy South London in Dulwich to visit one of my favourite galleries in London, the Dulwich Picture Gallery. It's always a pleasure to come down this way and explore a show with you entitled Tirzah Garwood, Beyond Ravilious. Now, Garwood has often been just sort of pigeonholed as the wife of her much more well-known husband, Eric Ravilious. This show, I imagine from the title, is hoping to rectify that. It's the first show of her work in Britain for over 70 years, would you believe? And I have to confess, I don't think I've seen one of her works with my own eyes. I know the Towner Gallery in Eastbourne holds a couple which I've visited on many occasions, but I can't remember seeing her. It's fair to say that her life was full of tragedy, especially in the later years. She lost her husband, Eric Ravilious, in a tragic plane crash over Iceland when he was working as a war artist in 1942. She herself, with 3 young children, was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1941 and tragically died of cancer in 1951 at the age of just 42. But having said that, from the bits I've read, she maintained an incredibly positive spirit and was painting right to the end of her life. I'm really excited for this exhibition because it promises to bring together 80 works of hers, mainly from private collections. I think from reading the press information, there's going to be a smattering of Eric Ravilious paintings as well, hopefully just to provide context because we don't want him overshadowing her. And I really don't know what to expect. I don't know if she's an artist who aesthetically I like or not. I don't know much about the subject matter that she chose to explore. And it's quite rare, that, isn't it, to see a major display of a historic artist that personally I know little about, and probably you don't either. And it comes on the back of the Dulwich Picture Gallery's most successful ever show. I think it was about 10 years ago, focusing on Eric Ravilious. I remember at the time getting an email actually saying, "You visited the Eric Ravilious show. It's been our most popular ever, and we're really surprised." Why? Eric Ravilious has experienced a renaissance of love for his work. Let's hope that this show does the same for Tirzah Garwood as that one did for Eric Ravilious. So come and join me as we head inside. This show is on until the 26th of May 2025. It's a long show. It's £18 to get in or £20 with a donation. Tirzah Garwood was actually born Eileen Lucy Garwood in 1908. Tirzah was initially a nickname. She was born into a military family. Her father was a colonel, and her early life was spent moving around the UK as her father's career took him to different places. It was only when he retired to Eastbourne that she settled, and when she was 16 she attended the Eastbourne School of Art, where artist Eric Ravilious taught her the skills of wood engraving. He had been taught wood engraving himself by Paul Nash, and so there's a wonderful line between these artists. She became a highly proficient wood engraver. Her work, which you can see here, the 4 Seasons, was accepted by the Society of Wood Engravers for its annual exhibition, and her skill shown in this work was praised by the Times, who admired her cool satirical eye and also her mark making. She and Ravilious worked together. Here you can just about see them working on murals for the Midland Hotel in Morecambe, that wonderful modernist masterpiece. She was unfortunately, as a woman and secondary artist, uncredited. This work by Ravilious shows they were both passionate about wood engraving, but some of the highlights of this exhibition are in the first room, which focus predominantly on her own wood engravings and some other works as well. And there's a lovely humour to these works, as well as exquisite detail. Look at the different textures of the different fabrics you can almost feel in this work here. So I'll leave you to explore these works for a little bit and join you again when we have a look at some of the paintings in this room. did have to say I found the wood engravings a real highlight of the show which you've just seen, but the room also contains some oil paintings from a much later period, and curatorially I struggle to see the link between these two, especially when we get to see many more of her oil paintings later on, because oil was actually a medium that she adopted quite late in her career. But anyway, it's interesting to see these, and also there's a few treats by Eric Ravilious as well to provide context. Garwood and Ravilious married in 1930, a marriage that was not wholly approved of by her family due to Ravilius's lower class, and they moved to Brick House in Great Bardfield, Essex in 1931 with fellow artists Edward and Charlotte Boredom. This might have been an artistic utopia for Eric and Edward, but in her autobiography, Tirzah Garwood portrays as an artist juggling multiple roles. She wrote in a separate letter, shall always regret that I stopped working. She had 3 children during this period, John in 1935, James in 1939, and Anne in 1941. She and Ravilious moved into their own home, Bank House in Castle Hedingham. Theirs was a complicated relationship in many ways. Both had affairs, but they clearly deeply loved each other as well, and were artistic collaborators as much as lovers. The first part of room 2 focuses on her marbling, because despite, quote, stopping work, Garwood began marbling papers in 1934 and soon developed a unique and distinctive style. Her work came to be in high demand for its originality, and she was selling work to design shops, publishers and private clients. She adapted designs to curve for lampshades. And to create these marble papers, she used a bath of water thickened with gum, tragacanth, onto the surface of which she could drop blobs of thinned oil paint without it either sinking or spreading too fast. She might let the spots expand into a circle, or deftly draw the paint with a needle into a feathered shape. A sheet of paper laid over these designs, and would then take up the coloured pattern. Once the paper was dry, she would flatten it and repeat the process several times, perhaps with a different colour or thickness of paint. The rest of the works in this room kind of show Ravilious and Garwood in conversation with each other, and the captions on some of the works draw attention to their different approaches to similar themes. Garwood faced a major health challenge with the diagnosis of breast cancer and an emergency mastectomy in 1941. In 1942, her husband, Eric Ravilious, died in a plane crash over Iceland while working as a war artist. His body was never recovered, and she was left recovering, bereft, and with 3 small children. In the mid-1940s, Garwood began working again in oils and developed a technique described as sophisticated naive. Ravilious, interestingly, had dismissed oils as a medium. She began combining printmaking, collage and oil to produce these 3D houses that was simple enough for children to enjoy, but also contained a huge amount of artistic skill. From these 3D houses, housed in cabinets, almost like butterfly collector cabinets, she began to produce more traditional oil paintings, and you can feel her confidence growing in these works. She married Henry Swansea, a BBC producer, in 1946, and moved to Primrose Hill in London, where she began to produce more and more confident oil paintings. In 1948, her cancer returned, and by June 1950, often in terrible terminal pain, she was admitted to a nursing home in the countryside in Essex. She describes the year as the happiest of her life because she was in the English countryside which she adored, and finally free and inspired to paint. Nearly all the work she created in this period of just over a year are here in this exhibition. As you can see from this gallery shot, they're small paintings because she was bedridden, often having to be propped up in bed to paint. And in many ways, they're taking on the sophisticated naive of the previous room. They're deceptively simple paintings that children could enjoy, but with hidden, sometimes deeper meaning. We see Garwood return to earlier themes, looking back, and earlier concerns as well. And we see just coming up this final painting, unfinished, that we know she was working on in the three days before her death on March the 27th, 1951. Well, art lovers, I hope that gave you a sense of the Tirzah Garwood show from the Dulwich Picture Gallery and whether it was a show for you or not. I left on a tremendous high with that understanding, as you often do, of the compulsion artists have to create after that final room where Tirzah Garwood was dying of cancer, which was producing work after work after work, almost on her deathbed. I also had a sense of frustration, a bit of a what if she hadn't been a woman in the 20s and 30s and 40s, because there was no doubt her career was stymied by the fact she was expected to take on a specific role and put her art second to allow her husband and other men to flourish, especially after she moved to Great Bardfield. And nothing could be more clear about that than the fact she kind of had to abandon wood carving, of which she was clearly excellently skilled, because it was so time consuming. So I was left with a frustration as well. I wanted to see what else her career and her short life could have produced, which was not able to be followed through because of the domestic role that she was expected to take on. I always think about these exhibitions in terms of the good, the bad and the beautiful. And if we start with the good, it was almost like in stereo, these first and final rooms. She was an amazing wood carver, and I loved seeing the wood carvings in the first room. It was such a highlight. She was undoubtedly, in my mind, one of the most important artists working in this medium during the 1920s and 30s. And the wood carvings were so human and yet so technically skilled. They were small, and I would love to have them on my wall. Bring your glasses, but they were outstanding. She was able to render the fabrics of the people within these wood carvings, and there was also a tremendous sort of droll humour in them. So I love that. I also love the final room. I mean, at their best, these works are kind of surrealist, but not in a Dorothea Tanning, Salvador Dali way. They're in a kind of Alice in Wonderland, Victorian way. She's clearly living within her imagination, and yet she combines this with a really excellent handling of the oils, a medium she adopted relatively late in her short life. So that was really good. In terms of the bad, there was nothing terrible about this show. It was a satisfying overview of her career, but the art her art in the second and third rooms did lose a little bit of power for reasons I explained about the kind of fact that she was expected to take on this domestic role. And I enjoyed seeing the marble works and in the second room, but the second half of the second room particularly does become a bit like a Ravilious show, and so that sort of made me a bit sad. But it wasn't the exhibition's fault. This was what was happening to her life. And in the third room, she begins to master and take on working in oil painting, something that Eric Ravilious dismissed according to the exhibition. And so some of the works here aren't up to the quality of the works in the final room. But that's not to say that these two rooms weren't valuable or important, and there was some really great documentation, photos, etc. in these rooms, which made them incredibly worthwhile. And I like seeing the sort of folk art element to her work when she was producing these houses in 3D in butterfly cases. So it wasn't that I didn't get anything out of those, but I did think the actual art produced by Garwood in these rooms wasn't as strong. In terms of the beautiful, well, there's so many works that I would love to have on my wall. Most of her great pieces are small, interestingly, and so as a result, I live in a Dopamine Heights. It's a small house, it's a cottage really, and so they would fit perfectly on my walls. I love this wood carving, The Train Journey. It's everything that's good about her wood carvings, the kind of fact that each individual human being in the train carriage, you could sense their character. I love the sort of downland in the background, and I love the fact that she's able to render the texture of the blouse and of the seats of the train carriage so exquisitely. She was an outstanding wood carver, and it's beautifully rendered. And in terms of the way it works from the final room, some are a bit twee for me, but I would love this one, The Spanish Lady. It's like mysterious, it's kind of slightly surrealist and beautifully executed, as is this one, Prehistoric Encounter, which intrigued me a lot. And finally, Springtime Flight, which looks back to her childhood when she lived for a while in Glasgow. So I could have very happily had any of those three and The Train Journey on my walls and would absolutely love them. Not that that's going to happen. Anyway, overall, I thought this was a really important, introduction or reintroduction of Tirzah Garwood to the British art loving public, and I'm very glad that she's got this show, which is on until the 26th of May. If you're interested in this work, do get along there. It's really worthwhile, and the kind of like, it's a show where the life story is compelling and the art in places is absolutely beautiful. £18 is good value, I think. £20 with a donation if you include, it's a small show, but if you include the fact that you get access to the wonderful Dulwich Picture Gallery collection with works like this Rembrandt, which I spent quite a lot of time looking at, then it's valuable. So then it's good value. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Thank you ever so much for watching.